being here and providing us with this audience. I know that Ahmad was hoping for a debate. I don't know that there's going to be a great deal of debate, because, of course, I don't have any disagreements whatsoever with anything that Ghada has just said. And in relation to, Ali's introductory remarks about there being two sides in political conflict, of course, there are always two sides in political conflict, but there is only one truth. And it is the job of serious academics and serious activists to establish what that truth is. And I think that's what this meeting is really about, to clarify the truth of what happened 100 years ago and the impact that that has had. So I want to make these few points. The first thing I want to say is this. What the Balfour Declaration did, and I think Ghada is right, that the British did not, they didn't foresee the full implications of it, but they had an instinct for what was going to be useful for them. And it goes back actually to the middle of the 19th century. In the middle of the 19th century, Palmerston, who was Prime Minister in the middle of the 19th century, saw the potential in having a Jewish settlement in Palestine, the way in which that could help to stabilize the region in relation to British interests. And when the whole discussion was going on around Balfour, one of the things that Weizmann, who of course then was the leading Zionist activist in Europe, based in Britain, one of the things that Weizmann said when he was lobbying for British support for the Zionist project was, Palestine will fall within the influence of England. This is how he imagined the outcome of the First World War. We could easily move 1 million Jews into Palestine within the next 50 to 60 years, and England would have a very effective and strong barrier, and we would have a country. So right from the very beginning, there's the sense that there's a deal to be done between imperialism and the Zionist project. And I think the British sensed that. They'd sensed it from the middle of the 19th century. And they weren't terribly bothered about the implications of that in relation to the people who lived in the area already. The cynicism was, if you look at some of the things that they were saying privately, the cynicism was pretty breathtaking. The Balfour Declaration makes reference, of course, hypocritical reference to the interests of the people who already lived in the area. And of course, there was no free land to be settled. Everybody in, the whole of Palestine was occupied by Palestinian farmers. And the British establishment didn't care about the implications of the Balfour Declaration. This is Balfour himself, shortly after the war, and he says, we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country. The four great powers are committed to Zionism, and Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is rooted in age-long tradition, in present needs, in future hopes, of far profounder import than the prejudices of 700,000 Arabs who happen to live there at the moment. That's the depth of the cynicism which was in play in relation to the British establishment. And why do they want this Jewish settlement that turns into the Jewish state? Which is, let's define it. It is a colonial settler state, utterly dependent on imperialism. It was dependent for its creation on the role of British imperialism, which Ghada has been talking about, and it's utterly dependent for its survival today on US imperialism. Without the flow of funds and without the flow of arms from the United States, it would not be able to sustain itself. It's a colonial settler state backed by imperialism. That is, if you like, a scientific definition of what this thing is, what this entity is. Whatever arguments there might be on the other side, that's the reality. Why does it work so powerfully for them? Because the Zionists have nowhere else to go. And I want to explain what I mean by that by referring to the Balfour Declaration's twin, its twin sister, which is the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Because at the same time as they are they're producing the Balfour Declaration. They have this secret agreement with their allies in the First World War that they're going to divide up the Middle East between themselves after the war. And in the short term, that means that there is, after the First World War, there's direct colonial rule in some places, like Syria, for example. There's colonial rule or neo-colonial rule through puppets, and that's the situation effectively in Iraq, where the British put Faisal in as the king. So they create a kind of settlement of the Middle East after the First World War, which chops it up into a series of what are initially separate states or provinces controlled by the outside imperial powers. But that creates the basis for the modern Middle East, that as these separate states, which have been created by this imperial settlement, as they achieve their independence, they retain that fragmentation. And that fragmentation is central to the ability of imperialism to maintain control over the region. You want a fragmented Middle East. You don't want a united Middle East. You want Sunni against Shia. You want Iran against Saudi. You want a series of conflicts inside the region that makes it easier for imperialism to maintain effective control over the economic sources of the region, crucially, of course, oil supplies. You know, you can't have a discussion about any of what is happening in the Middle East without keeping in mind all the time the Middle East has 70% of the world's oil supplies, and that's the single most important commodity in the modern world capitalist economy. That ultimately is what all this is about. Now, the problem for the imperial powers, and it starts with Balfour and it starts with Sykes-Picot and it comes right through to the present. The problem for them is this. In relation to the fragmentation of the Middle East, the wider fragmentation, the legacy of Sykes-Picot, the other bit of the equation, the problem with that is that the fragmentation is never certain. And that is because the people of the region have a common interest in uniting against the imperial domination of the region and uniting against the Zionist presence. So the possibility arises always of an upsurge of some kind of pan-Arab movement that can begin to overcome the fragmentation and bring the Arabs together as a whole and threaten the settlement which is imposed upon the region at the end of the First World War. Challenge the fragmentation, which is the basis of effective imperial control over the region. That possibility exists. It existed in the 1950s to a degree, at the time of Nasser, when Egypt and Syria, the two key countries of the Middle East, were at the time anyway, were moving towards some kind of unification. It arose very recently with the Arab Spring, and the possibility that there was going to be a revolution from below to democratize the region, to achieve major social reforms, to challenge head-on the domination of the region by neoliberal capitalism, by foreign corporations, and so on. And I tell you, in the Pentagon, in London too, all of the lights were shining red with alarm, as the Arab people began to move into action in 2011 and 2012 with the possibility of a pan-Arab revolution sweeping across the region. That was a moment of extreme danger for them. What's crucial about Israel is this. The Arab people of the region could come together in a mass movement from below to challenge the dominance of the Western powers, the dominance of the imperial powers. The crucial thing about the Zionists is they have nowhere else to go. They are an alien presence in the region. They are a colonial settler state. That means they have to be necessarily, under all circumstances, absolutely loyal to those who supply them with the arms and the funds in a situation of crisis in the region. I completely agree with what Gada has said about them losing control. Sometimes, if you like, I mean, they create a Frankenstein's monster in a sense. That Zionism is sometimes out of control. What is absolutely clear is that what they can be certain of is that the Zionists cannot form an alliance with the mass of the people of the region and become part of an anti-imperialist movement that begins to challenge in a serious way the domination of the region by the Western powers. That's why Israel matters to them. That's why Zionism has been so crucial to the way in which the region has operated and the way in which the imperial powers have operated in relation to it for the last 100 years.